The story of America is often told as a straight line, an inevitable rise from a fragile colony to a global superpower. But the truth is far more dramatic. The history of the United States was never guaranteed. It was shaped by near-miss disasters, hidden decisions, and moments when the country teetered on the edge of collapse. This is the story of 10 events that almost changed America forever. 10 moments when the nation's fate hung by a thread. If even one of these moments had ended differently, the United States, today's map, its power, even its very existence might have been completely unrecognizable. We begin in the cold waters of the Atlantic in the year 1776, when the American Revolution was still young and fragile. General George Washington had just led the Continental Army across the icy Delaware River, achieving a daring victory at Trenton. But only days later, disaster loomed. Under heavy fog and bitter cold, Washington planned a second surprise attack at Princeton. His army was exhausted, undersupplied, and dangerously outnumbered. At one point, a British column discovered the American position and charged directly at Washington's troops. Chaos erupted, soldiers scattered, and in that moment, Washington did the one thing no general should ever do. He rode directly toward enemy fire on horseback. Musket balls flew past him, some so close they tore through his coat. His officers were certain he would be killed. If Washington had died in that moment, the revolution would likely have collapsed. The Continental Congress had no replacement strong enough to unify the colonies. The army would have lost its moral center. Britain would have crushed the rebellion. The United States, this future global superpower, could have died before it even began. But the musket ball missed. Washington survived, rallied the troops, and won the battle. And with that victory, the fragile dream of American independence breathed again. It was the first of many close calls the new nation would face. More than 3 decades later, in 1814, the young United States faced a crisis that nearly erased it from the map. The War of 1812 had dragged on disastrously. The British Navy had blockaded American ports. Trade collapsed, and the American military was completely outmatched. Then came the moment that could have ended the nation as we know it, the burning of Washington. DC British forces marched into the capital almost unopposed. They set the Capitol, the Treasury, and the White House ablaze. Flames lit the night sky as the symbol of American democracy burned to the ground. Government officials fled. President James Madison was forced into the countryside. For the first time, the United States looked like a failed experiment. And then nature intervened. Out of nowhere, a violent tornado tore across Washington. The storm brought torrential rain that extinguished the fires and scattered British troops. Eyewitnesses described it as if the sky itself was fighting for America's survival. If that storm had not arrived, if British reinforcements had secured the city, Washington, D.C. might never have been rebuilt as the capital. The government might have fractured. The United States could have collapsed back into regional states, ending the American Republic forever. But America's survival didn't mean its borders were secure. In 1862, during the darkest chapter of the Civil War, the fate of the Union rested not on a battlefield, but on a piece of lost paper lying in a field in Maryland. It was Special Order 191, handwritten by Confederate General Robert E. Lee. It contained the full Confederate battle plan for the Maryland campaign, and by pure accident, perhaps the greatest accident in American military history, fell into Union hands. When Union soldiers delivered the order to General George McClellan, he suddenly knew every detail of Lee's movements. If that paper had never been lost, Lee might have crushed the Union Army, forced European powers to recognize the Confederacy, and secured Southern independence. America would have split into two nations, one built on union, the other on slavery. The world today would be unrecognizable. Instead, the intelligence helped lead to the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American history, but one that stopped the Confederate advance and allowed Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. The fate of millions changed because someone dropped a piece of paper in a field. History swung again in 1865, just days after the Civil War ended. President Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater, unaware that his assassination was only one part of a much larger plot. The conspirators had planned to kill not just Lincoln, but Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward the same night. If even two of those assassinations had succeeded, the United States government would have been decapitated at its most fragile moment. The Confederacy had collapsed. The nation was exhausted. Without leadership, America could have plunged into chaos splitting again, falling into foreign influence or igniting new civil violence. But the attacks failed. Seward survived multiple stab wounds. Johnson's assassin lost his nerve and never acted. Only Lincoln died. Even that single loss changed American history, reshaping Reconstruction and civil rights for generations. But if all three leaders had been killed, it might have ended America's rebirth entirely. In 1898, the United States faced another crisis, one at sea. The USS Maine, a massive American battleship, exploded suddenly while anchored in Havana Harbor. The cause of the blast was never definitively proven, but in the heat of outrage, newspapers and politicians blamed Spain. The nation surged into the Spanish-American War. That war transformed the United States into a global empire, bringing territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines under American control. But here's the forgotten truth. If the Maine had not exploded, or if investigators had concluded early that it was an accident, America might never have entered the war. Without the war, the United States might not have become a Pacific power. There might have been no American presence in Asia, no strategic naval reach, no later influence in World War II. A single explosion, perhaps accidental, set America's imperial rise in motion. Just 14 years later, America's future hinged on another ocean tragedy, the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912. The disaster shook the world. But it also influenced American policy in ways that could have steered history differently. Among the passengers on that ship were some of the most powerful and influential businessmen in America, including John Jacob Astor, one of the wealthiest men in the world. Many of these men opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve, a centralized banking system that would fundamentally restructure the American economy. But after the Titanic sank, opposition weakened. Some of the wealthiest anti-Federal Reserve voices were gone, silenced by tragedy. The Federal Reserve was established the very next year in 1913, without the Titanic disaster. The politics might have shifted. The Federal Reserve might have failed to pass. And without the Federal Reserve, America's economic history from the Great Depression to post-war growth to modern monetary policy would have been radically different. A ship sinking in the icy Atlantic helped shape the economy of a nation for a century. But perhaps no near-miss disaster was more dangerous than the one that occurred in 1962 at the height of the Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought humanity closer to nuclear war than ever before. American naval ships blockaded Cuba, where the Soviet Union had secretly placed nuclear missiles capable of striking the United States in minutes. Tension filled the air. Fighter jets scrambled, submarines patrolled, and deep underwater, a Soviet submarine named B-59 was cut off from communication and believed war had already begun. The crew prepared to launch a nuclear torpedo at the US Navy. Two Soviet officers agreed to fire. Only one man, Vasily Arkhipov, refused. Without his veto, the torpedo would have launched, triggering a full-scale nuclear exchange. Hundreds of millions would have died. The United States would have been devastated, and global civilization might not have survived. One man in a silent steel vessel beneath the sea prevented the end of America and, possibly, the world. But nuclear danger didn't end there. In 1983, the world came close to disaster again, this time inside a Soviet bunker. An early warning system detected incoming American nuclear missiles. Sirens blared, red lights flashed. Computer screens declared that the United States had launched a nuclear attack. Protocol demanded immediate retaliation. Just minutes separated peace from total annihilation. But one Soviet officer, Stanislav Petrov, made a choice that defied protocol. He refused to report the alarms. He trusted his gut, believing the detection was a malfunction. And he was right. The system had misread sunlight reflections as missile launchers. If Petrov had followed orders, the Soviet Union would have fired nuclear missiles at American cities. The United States would have responded. The Cold War would have ended in fire, not victory. America's entire future, from technology to culture to global power, might have vanished in a single night. Even after the Cold War ended, America remained vulnerable in unexpected ways. On September 11, 2001, the United States suffered the deadliest attack on its own soil. But what most people don't know is how much worse it could have been. Several additional planes targeted Washington, and intelligence later revealed that the attackers had originally explored even bigger plans. One involved hijacking 10 or more aircraft simultaneously. Another involved crashing a plane into a nuclear power plant. Some plans targeted major cities beyond New York and Washington, including Chicago and Los Angeles. If even one of those expanded plans had succeeded, the death toll would have multiplied. The economy could have collapsed entirely. Martial law might have been declared. The United States might have entered a prolonged period of internal instability. Even the political divisions we see today might be far deeper or entirely different. Then, in 2008, disaster struck again, but this time in the heart of the global economy. The financial system teetered on the edge of collapse. Major banks folded. Housing markets crashed. Millions lost their savings. Behind the scenes, Federal Reserve officials warned that the entire American banking system could fall like dominoes within hours. If decisive action hadn't been taken, rapid bailouts, emergency lending, massive stabilization efforts, the crisis could have spiraled into a full economic shutdown. ATMs could have stopped working. Paychecks could have bounced. Supply chains might have collapsed. For the first time in modern history, the United States could have faced a complete financial freezer scenario where the world's largest economy simply stopped. The Great Recession was devastating, but the alternate reality would have been far worse. A second Great Depression that could have reshaped American life for generations. And yet, even in moments of triumph, America has faced moments that nearly veered off course. In the early 20th century, as America rose to global power, multiple assassinations were attempted on presidents whose leadership shaped the nation's future. Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and Harry Truman among them. If even one attempt had succeeded at the wrong moment, history would look dramatically different. Theodore Roosevelt's progressive reforms might never have happened. Franklin Roosevelt's leadership in World War II could have been cut short, altering the war's outcome. Truman's survival ensured the Marshall Plan and the rebuilding of Europe. At every turn, a single bullet could have changed the destiny of a nation. As we look back at these 10 moments, 10 events that almost changed America forever, we begin to see history not as a straight line, but as a fragile chain of unlikely survivals, a musket ball that misses by inches. A storm that arrives at the perfect moment. A lost piece of paper that shifts the course of a war. A ship that sinks, reshaping economics. A submarine officer or radar technician who chooses restraint instead of retaliation. A pilot, a firefighter, a first responder who makes a life or death decision that saves millions. America today exists because of countless moments when disaster narrowly missed, when fate balanced on the edge of coincidence, courage, or pure accident. These moments remind us that history is not inevitable. It is made and saved by human choices. Choices that echo across centuries, shaping nations and generations. And so, the story of America is not just a story of victories and achievements. It is the story of survival against impossible odds. The story of a nation that could have fallen many times, but did not. The story of what almost happened, and what miraculously did not. This is the story of 10 events that almost changed America forever. But in truth, it is also the story of the fragile, unpredictable nature of history itself. Because for every famous event that fills our textbooks, there are thousands of hidden moments, known names, untold decisions, unnoticed accidents that quietly shaped the world we live in. And if even one of them had gone differently, America, as we know it today, might never have existed at all.